This is Hat and Tat, a business podcast that promises to be at least 15% more useful than your LinkedIn scroll.
Let's get to it.
All right, so today we are talking about 7 Powers from author Hamilton Helmer. And this is a business book that was released over a decade ago and has since become a cult classic amongst the Silicon Valley thought leaders and heavyweights and titans of industry. And we've listened to a few podcasts recently with Hamilton himself jumping on and going through his 7 powers with some guests. Notably, he was on the Acquired podcast.
Yep.
One of the things I found most interesting, though, is the date range of these podcasts. Like I listened to one from 2020, another from 2022, another one from 2024. So this has staying power, and he's a consistent guest, and people have been listening to it for a long time. So there are 7 powers, which is a lot too much for us to pack into an episode. So Hamilton, throughout some of these conversations, talked about 3 phases of business: origination, takeoff, and sustainability. So we're going to break this down 3 special episodes and talk about, in this episode, the origination phase and the first 2 powers of counterpositioning and cornered resource.
Okay, Steve, counterpositioning. What's the definition for counterpositioning?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Craig. Counterpositioning, as Helmer describes it, this is when a newcomer into an industry adopts a new superior business model, so it gives customers and everyone a benefit. And the incumbent in the industry cannot copy the business model outright because doing so would just decimate the core of their business. So that's the barrier.
Okay, I like this one.
And the example that he gives in several of the podcasts is Netflix, and not Netflix versus Blockbuster, but rather Netflix versus HBO.
Yeah, and I found this interesting. Why was that?
Yeah, and this gets into the original content creation. So Netflix was started to create their own original episodes that were doing really well, whereas HBO, who was like the king of content at the time, creating like the most watched shows, they were still using the traditional model of distributing their shows through studios, and they'd get their studio contracts. Mm-hmm. Whereas Netflix was direct to consumer. They didn't have anyone paying them millions of dollars to distribute the shows. They just had their subscribers paying basically for the content. And Netflix started dominating the awards, dominating the ratings, and has probably become the new king of content, and other traditional studios have kind of fallen behind on people looking forward to original content. So that was the counterpositioning.
Yeah, that's a cool example. Okay, we haven't heard each other's examples. Hopefully we don't have the same ones. Mine for this is Vanguard versus traditional mutual funds. So Jack Bogle, way back when, created the index fund, and all these other mutual funds were charging like 1% to 2%, and Vanguard came on the scene and charged a fraction of that just to track the index. Since then, they become one of the largest asset managers in the entire world. The existing wealth management firms couldn't adjust to that model because they can't take their fees from 1% to 2% down to a fraction of that because they weren't built with that pricing model. And I read a piece recently that said Vanguard has saved investors something like $500 billion in fee savings over the lifetime. Like, they've changed people's financial outcomes. So huge impact on the industry, and a really cool example, I think, of counterpositioning.
That's super interesting. So all these other like self-serve brokerages that have come over time, Wealthsimple comes to mind. I know there's a few others out there, and I'm sure all the major banks, they kind of have their own manage your own funds, direct trading stuff. Was that just a response to Vanguard?
Yeah, it's a response to Vanguard. And it's actually interesting. If you look in the data, every single area that Vanguard goes into suffers like huge fee reductions. So as they went into different funds like emerging markets or whatever specific industries, that entire sector, like those funds actually like lose revenue because they have to compete now with Vanguard. It's pretty cool.
That is interesting. And not even like a one-off counter-positioning. That's just like in their DNA.
Yeah. And the craziest part is the company's actually not owned by like anyone. It's not public, and it's not owned by a family. It's actually owned by the funds. So every single dollar that goes into Vanguard just gets recycled into improving and lowering their service. It's insane.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay, my example, I think you're going to appreciate this because it also comes from the finance world.
Oh, nice.
The company Wise, once upon a time TransferWise, that specializes in cross-border payments.
Ooh, tell me more.
And they went after, not the big banks, the big companies, but they went after like smaller businesses and individuals. And from what I can tell by my research, so traditional banks have their Swift banking network where they're routing money back and forth. And Wise instead, they built a network of local bank accounts. So when you want to transfer money, it doesn't actually cross borders. They just have you put it in a one bank account and then they just like deliver it on the other end. So they're not paying these fees. And so what they did is they charged this is what I found, like 0.5% fee to transfer money instead of like the traditional like 3, 4, 5% foreign exchange rate.
Okay.
And they were able to basically steal all of the individuals, smaller business away from like the major banks that didn't want to compete with that.
Interesting.
So they've grown to apparently they process over $240 billion annually now in international payments. And their net revenue is over $2.5 billion, and they've just like focused on this market. And it was interesting because I was like trying to figure out like if you were a big bank, why wouldn't you just like drop the payments and corner them out? But it's such a small part of their business because they deal in so many financial services that the foreign exchange is kind of just like, it's just there. And for them, but also if they have if they're dropping from 3, 4, 5% down to like 0.5%, they could take this big chunk and all of a sudden it like comes down to nothing. And and that's, I think, probably the whole example of counterpositioning is just like, you don't want to compete because it just decimates your business.
That's cool. That's an interesting, I've never even heard of that company. Now, this isn't really a company, but can I share one more?
Yeah.
I think this is really cool of counterpositioning as an advertisement. And this is done by Patagonia, like the apparel manufacturer, Black Friday, November 25th, 2011. And it had an image of Patagonia's best-selling R2 fleece jacket. And then it basically said, like, don't buy this jacket. It was taken out in the New York Times full page ad. And it was like, don't buy this jacket. It uses like 36 gallons of water, 20 pounds of carbon dioxide are emitted. Waste generated totaled like 2/3 of the jacket's waste or weight. So
it was their jacket. It wasn't a competitor jacket where they're saying don't buy this jacket.
No, this was their jacket, and their whole thing was like, we are not advocating for consumerism. We are advocating for recycling clothing and repairing clothing. So the goal is to buy good apparel, keep it, repair it, and don't deal with this waste because this is a fact of the apparel business. And I think it was super cool just because it went against the whole Black Friday, like buy more. And it worked. Like in the next 9 months, sales went up 30%. So I think that's a really interesting tactic of counterpositioning against a trend or like a industry expectation, like with Black Friday. Really cool way to think through it.
I think that, I like that example. There's one of the powers that we're going to talk about in the future is branding. And he does make the distinction between just like brand awareness, like just buying an ad, or like branding power. But I think this is a good counterpositioning example. Like you're saying, like it wasn't just like a moment in time where they got a boost of revenue for like a week or a couple of weeks because of the ad. It was like a solid 9 months of their positioning against the consumerism retail culture.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Okay, next power we're going to cover is
cornered resource.
This one's tough.
This one was very tough.
Yeah.
And he actually even admits it that this is probably the rarest of all the 7 powers.
Oh, interesting.
So the definition is if you have access, preferential access, to a coveted high value asset and it gives you an advantage, but also at the same time, if someone else was to have that exact same resource, they would also get the exact same advantage. So it's not unique to you, it's unique because you have this resource. One thing I thought that was very interesting, one that he said is like, this is very rare and you don't see it very much. But also he said a go-to for a lot of people's examples is people, especially executive talent, because
I don't like that.
No, well, I liked how he said like that's most people's examples, but he disagreed with it.
Okay, good.
And he connects, one of the interesting things about all these powers is he always connects them back to value. So even if you had a well-known executive that is going to give you preferential treatment, the amount that you would have to pay that person to come in and work for your company removes any of like the value that you're going to get for it. It's arbitraged out. So you have to, it's not just you can do something. It's all about that benefit barrier.
Okay, yeah.
So like you have to get a benefit, but it also has to be a barrier and it has to bring value back to you. So you got to grow a business because of it.
I like it.
Despite that, one of the examples he gives is Pixar and their founding group of creatives that all work together, especially on their first successes, and how they were a cornered resource because no one else could replicate that.
And man, like going back to our Pixar episode with Ed Catmull, or rather where we talk about Ed Catmull.
Right. He was there in spirit. No, I think that's apparent that like they were a special team. And I mean, even when they were guiding other experts in the industry at Disney later on, it took them like 2 years to get their process working at Disney. So obviously like that was special. Hot take though?
Yeah, hot take.
I don't think that was a cornered resource. I think if you, because we read the book and did so much research on that,
yeah,
I think it falls better into the category of process power.
Ooh, yeah.
Especially because he talked about how they didn't get it right away and they had the brain trust process.
Yeah.
And it took them several years to get it to a point where they were like turning out the hits consistently.
That's a good point.
But that is neither here nor there.
Okay, are we going to examples?
Let's go into examples. This was a tough one. And I'd never heard of this company before I started researching the internet, but a Dutch company called ASML, a very valuable tech company. And apparently they have a near monopoly on extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, which are used to etch circuit patterns in advanced microchips, which if you're reading the news or the internet in the past 2 years, microchips are very valuable because of this little thing called artificial intelligence or AI,
as they all call it nowadays. Yeah. Can I tell you more?
Please. Was this yours too?
This is one of my picks for one of the powers, and part of this was going to be, but so ASML, their machines, these lithography machines, and specifically the ones that are extreme ultraviolet, the EUV machines. So they take like 15 to 22 weeks to make. Their newest ones cost $400 million, and they ship them on
to make the machine,
and they ship them on 747s. That's how big they are, to the place where they're going to be manufacturing chips. And then the process is insane. So
wait, did they make the machines?
Yeah, they make the machines that go to like TSMC and everything, Samsung, Intel, and those companies then process and make the chips. But they make the machine that makes the chip, that like imprints the chips.
Do they also like because they own the machines, they also like own the IP behind the process of the machines?
Yeah, no one can do this. The other thing they've cornered the resource is they're a partner with and the only client of Zeiss, which is their mirror manufacturer in Germany. The mirrors are so flat, like they're like atomic precision. If you expand the mirror to the size of Germany, the largest bump would be no more than 1 millimeter high. That's like how accurate their production process is.
That's wild.
Then when the machine starts the process to get a light wavelength of 13.5 nanometers, which is required to print like sub 7 nanometer and 3 nanometer transistors for like, these are the most modern leading edge chips. Normal light source doesn't work. And air and glass absorb the EUV light. So it has to happen in a vacuum. So you have this machine has a vacuum, and then inside a generator drops microscopic liquid tin droplets, each that are about 25 microns in diameter. That's roughly like 1/3 the thickness of a human hair. and it falls straight down the vacuum chamber. And then there's a prep pulse where a laser like fires the pulse at it, low intensity, and that flattens the tin droplet like a pancake. And then the main pulse, it's a massive, ultra powerful laser. It heats the tin to 220,000 degrees Celsius, which is like 40 times hotter than the surface of the sun, and basically like vaporizes it, and that creates the glowing ball of high energy plasma. And the tin atoms are violently ionized, and then they emit that 13.5 nanometer length of light, and that's what imprints. And that's happening at 50,000 times a second. It's insane.
50,000 times a second.
A second.
I feel like I was just in a science lesson.
Yeah. No, I went down a rabbit hole with that one. Before you gave your choice, I changed mine on the fly. So this was
that going to be your
Oh yeah,
cornered resource?
It's such a good cornered resource. Like, it's especially now with AI and all the capex it's going through. It's wild that like you have one company in the world that can do this. Yeah. And I mean, their stock took a hit this week because some announcements came out that China's got these other lithography machines, but those are like the DUVs, which is like it's who wants that? Who wants that?
DUV? No, thank you, sir.
Well, and they're just getting that, and that technology was created 15 years ago by ASML. So it's pretty crazy. Okay, so mine for cornered resource is
drumroll,
Sibelco and the Quartz Corp.
Cool. I've never heard of either.
No, and no one would have. So oddly enough, if you go down this rabbit hole of semiconductors, then you find out that to make a cone of silicon to cut for your wafers that you would then put your chips onto, you need very, very pure silicone, but you have to melt it. So what they do is you have to get a quartz like holder, crucible, and then you melt the silicone into that, and then you basically extract it in this weird process into a cylinder. But because those crucibles are holding the liquid silicone, they need to be absolutely pure, so there's no impurities put into the silicone. And there's one mine there's one high purity quartz deposit that's mined in the U.S. In Spruce Pine, North Carolina, and its purity level reaches up to like 99.999% purity. So it's really the only ones that are used for this, making these crucibles that you melt silicon into. So it's this weird geological process that created this one deposit in the world that's the purest in the entire world. And it's got like one little town by it, super secretive. No one talks about it. But yeah, super interesting.
That's impressive that they can take advantage of it, because even if you have the resources, like to build up the supply chain, the infrastructure, the company around it to take advantage of it is still a lot of work. It's not going to be a guaranteed success. And it's makes me think of the gold versus pickaxe strategy. Like everyone's talking about like the tech companies that are building the AI, but then we have all these companies surrounding it that make it happen that you just never hear about.
Yeah, completely agree. It's really cool. If you got some time, go down the rabbit hole. And then next episode, what are we talking about, Steve? What's the next three?
Yeah, so that's it for this one. We covered the first 2 powers of Hamilton Helmer's 7 powers, which were counterpositioning and cornered resources. So that'll be it for part 1. Join us next time for part 2, when we will cover network economies, scale economies, and switching costs, which are the 3 powers related to the takeoff phase of a business.
Sweet. Looking forward to the examples.